Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on your Monday night. We are here tonight to talk about creating and developing short-term programs for our players.
So I'm thinking about, from a player's perspective, how can my season-long plan, or in this instance tonight, the short-term planning stuff, how can it fix to my why am I doing it? Well, it's to hopefully give the players a fun and enjoyable experience. It's hopefully so they learn something, maybe. That might be nice. It's hopefully to inspire them into a sort of physically active lifestyle. Probably everybody in the call this evening probably has experienced and knows the benefits of sport, what it can bring to you in terms of like wider things. So I guess I want to, players to have that experience of sport in their life. And it gives them life skills, doesn't it? If we talk about leadership or communication or understanding rules, strategies, tactics, competition, they're all sort of life skills that you're going to need anyway outside of football. So I guess it's quite a big answer, that a big philosophical sort of stance, isn't it? But yeah, that physical literacy journey for me in the grassroots environment, particularly the foundation phase, the primary school age, is important.
Is built into the program. So you do practices and you behave, your coach behavior and what you do enables players to become braver on the ball. If you say, right, the purpose is I want to become braver on the ball, and then you put on practices which are too hard and they're not going to do it, and then even more succinct is that you castigate players for making mistakes, then they're not going to be braver on the ball. So all the purpose, the philosophy and the values of belief underpinned by what you do after that in week to week. And what is interesting is that I have to say that the Premier League, fine, it can be any team. If it's got a purpose, a philosophy and values and beliefs, and they stick by that, then the program takes care of itself.
Now we can almost just dive into like what a short-term program could actually look like. So it's a block of practices, ideally. It will connect learning over several weeks or a cycle of weeks for your players. There should be an overarching theme or topic, because then that will allow for players to connect week to week. And then it's looking beyond individual sessions. So you as a coach might say, well, I get an hour with my players every week. So that's across 6 weeks, it's 6 hours of time. But how we need to look at it is 6 hours of opportunity, or 6 times 1 hour opportunities with our players to almost link the sessions to the sessions, or the practices within the sessions, to make sure they link, to really support that connection and that player connection and that learning for them. And through that, we can better understand player needs as well.
A few questions for me around it, this one, which I'd sort of ask if I went to observe a coach or I was chatting to a coach around this sort of way of doing stuff. And there's lots of different ways. There's no right way particularly. But what happens after, say, week 2 if they haven't quite got the receiving under pressure? What do we do then? Because we've planned out that they're moving on to a new topic in week 3, do we automatically just move on? Question mark, or do we stick with it until they've got it? So you've got to have that flexibility, I think, to be able to do that. I think about breadth over depth, not making it episodic, so learning doesn't start and stop at the end of each of those weekly sessions. It might need to continue, and just having that flexibility around it as well.
I think the context is really important about how many times. So, for example, receiving under pressure, if that was week 2, that would be three sessions plus a game probably. If you're under 13s, might be more if they do day release. Whereas in academies, in grassroots, that might be once a week. So what the tendency is to try and move on, and Brams is absolutely right, is you look at those 6 topics there and you say receiving techniques, receiving under pressure. I can imagine receiving under pressure going on for 6 weeks. It's just in different parts of the pitch. And I think that receiving under pressure, you have to say, okay, when you're receiving to score, you're under pressure. Yeah. So I think it's very, you have to simplify the game and say, what is it you want them to do? If you want them to receive under pressure, then practice that and keep practicing it in different scenarios over and over again. It's not the different topics. It's the same topic, but in different circumstances. I'll give you a prime example. Say you're doing receiving. Let's stick with receiving under pressure. One coach works with the receivers, the others work with the defenders to make sure the pressure's right. And that's the key, because if you want the players, and let's stick with week 2, receiving under pressure, which we all value and say, by the way, if you're any good at that, you've got a good chance in a game. Right? So there's attackers and defenders. What tends to happen is the coach works at receiving under pressure, but doesn't really get the pressure right. And that's where the glory of having a second coach that focuses on the pressure and getting that right.
For me, it comes back to probably how I first started in teaching and in coaching football as well. Is I'd go straight to look for a practice. I'm looking for a game or an activity to play. And I've not even thought about what I want the players to learn or the pupils to learn in the school environment. So I think it's around getting away from thinking practice first and starting to think learning first. So flip that around. So here's what I want the players to learn in the way Noddy's just described that for 3 weeks of receiving in defence, receiving in the midfield and receiving in the attacking third. So what's the sort of key points that sit under that I want the players to learn? And then I think about where's the stretch and challenge, where's those points that you were talking about, Nod. And then the last thing I'm going to do really is think of some games and activities that might allow that to happen then. And that's when these that are on the screen now on this slide might come out.
If you, for example, want players to be good in a game on the ball, then they have to deal with the ball under pressure. Simple as that. So there's the strap line for that. And then you're right, you get consistency in coaching. I'm reading down the slide here. And if you've got a program, you've got some steer, but do not be wedded to the program. Be wedded to where the kids are at any one time.
We'll always do it with the plan do review. So you can almost consider what went well, what could it be even better, how did my players learn best? Did I meet their needs for learning? And then this is, I guess, what we've already hit on. But are there any bits that we feel that players need more time on next week or in the next session if you do train again that week? I think we are all in agreement, Noddy, Brams and I, that it's more than okay to do the same session twice. Sometimes players really enjoy the element of getting to do it again because it's recognisable to them. They go, oh, I remember that from last time.
Just tweak it.
It's great for them. So that's really, really key. Then something around is it reflecting the game that my players play? So if you just have a little second now to all reflect on the game your players play at the weekend, are you ensuring the practices you are putting on reflect the game that they will be playing? And then with that, we've just slightly spoken about it, but how might it look if I'm in a fixed curriculum where I've got to absolutely stay structured to what I've put in place? But then how might it look if I can add some flexibility? And then there's something there is around what might it look like for you if you're working in development football, so you're working in that space where you're the pathway and really wanting to support players coming through. But it might look slightly different if you are performance end and it's about a result and 3 points on the weekend.
That plan do review thing is I'm not then doing a massively detailed session plan because I've got a really good 4 to 6 week program or planning. I spent my time planning that way rather than individual sessions, which sort of makes it joined up and sequenced. I reckon it won't be as messy. I reckon it's got more chance of being sequenced and sort of joined up, probably by doing it that way. So the review bit then comes as you're planning and thinking about how it's gone and then how it might come next week. So I think it's probably just worth mentioning that, especially from a grassroots, you're probably going straight from work to the session that starts at 6. You get there at 5 to 6. You've got an hour on the facility that you've maybe got to use. So you're waiting to go and you're thinking about what's going next. So with this program, it sort of takes away that immediate pressure because you've already sort of thought about it sort of 4-6 weeks in advance. So for me, for the plan do review process, I just thought I'd share that because that's definitely how I've moved away from spending real detailed time on the individual session to actually spending more time on the on the short-term program, as we're calling it on the webinar tonight, and that's really helped.
You could have some players that maybe technically don't look as strong, but maybe psychologically or socially they're really, really great. So you're not always going to have a technical player that's great across the other 3 areas. You might have players that are slightly better in areas and then slightly need some more support in areas. So I guess, like, how can we use the 4-corner model to understand where we might stretch or support some players? So this is something we've just put together in terms of questions for you to ask yourself. If you're looking at your player or players, your team, or you look and zoom in on one, you look at them holistically around how they are technically, tactically, how they are psychologically, how they are physically, and how they are socially, because that might actually then support you with providing that stretch or support, some more challenge for that individual.
You want players to receive the ball under pressure. That's one of your things that you're not going to, they're compulsory things that you would like all your players to do. Some are physically more able to do that than others. And depending on their age, and if they've got a growth spurt or they're in sort of the mid-teens where they might be shooting up, and they might be doing that at 10, by the way, you have to take into account the physical differences that people have, because you've got the same topic, which is, right, want to receive the ball under pressure, and then you've got a big one against a small one, or a small one against a big one, or they're evened up. And so the physical differences will make a huge difference of how they approach that challenge. And so you have to have fairly clear things when you're doing your planning, or when you're taking a session, or when you're looking at a certain element of your program, is who deals with it better than anyone else. So, for example, a technical player, and I'll come back to the physical in a minute, a very technical player is probably quite confident. So eyes on that. Okay, I'm going to give you a bit of more of a challenge. You might say this particular player, and it's less evident in academies, although I'll come back to that, is one player might absolutely struggle with their control, their technical stuff, and so their confidence is through this. So you give them more space and so on and so forth. So what you have to do is look at each player and say, yep, we want you all. This is what we want in the program. We want you to be able to pass the ball from A to B. But do you know what? Physically, they're going to be so different. How do you manage? And that's where the skill of the coach is to raise the challenge point according to those 4 corners, particularly physically.
Now we're going to just dive on a little bit around, we want players to keep coming back. We want them to, across the program, we want them to have enjoyment, want them to be engaged. So if you all now just have a little think around, we're just going to almost press pause. So just spend a couple of minutes while Brams, Noddy and I move on to the next couple of slides. I just want you to think and maybe jot down, do you know why your players play? How do we keep our players coming back? And how do we help them feel like they belong? So that sense of belonging. And then Brams, if I just bring you in here around, obviously, next couple of slides are like, the 3 R's, step, and practice type or practice spectrum. So why are these, I guess, 3 elements or 3 tools so important for promoting engagement and enjoyment with our players?
Yeah, I think we've not mentioned the 3 R's, but I think we've talked about these 3 things already. So if I think about the repetition, both Noddy and I have mentioned that in terms of giving them time on task. Mm-hmm. If you want them to get better at something, we've got to give them a chance to get better at it. Not until the board's sick of it, but we've got to give them that chance for that depth of learning to occur. Otherwise, we're just getting surface level learning. So that repetition is giving them time on task to get better at it. The realism one is around the game. We've just spoken about the 4-corner model, so I'm not going to go over what I've already said on that, but it's just reflecting what the game is. And again, I'm going to say it probably a few more times yet this evening. Don't just go top left. Find the balance. Find the balance across the 4 corners based on what your players need. And then the relevance one is sort of relevant to the players' needs. They're all going to be at different stages, whatever age group you're coaching. You'll have someone who might be physically strong and can dominate from a physical perspective, but actually is not really a leader on the pitch, doesn't take ownership of stuff. But you might have someone who's not as physical who might do that. So it's about harnessing those. And when you're thinking it from a four-corner perspective and the relevance of the game, I tell you what you start to do, you start to look at your players differently. Because if you think about, let's say, the gifted and talented ones in your team, the best players, where are they best? Where's the bias? I'll tell you where they'll be. They're probably the most physical ones, and they're probably the most technical ones.
Mm-hmm. But
they might not have the other side, and that's where they need help. That's where your short-term program comes in, because they need help with that. Mm-hmm. So back to the grassroots example, the step principle is a great way just to have in the back of your mind, and you don't pre-plan this because you don't know what you're going to do until you're in the moment. Mm-hmm. So you might just want to adjust the size of the area. You might just want to alter the number of players. So we might have set up 5v5, or we might change it after a few minutes to make it 6v4 because of what you're seeing in front of you. So the step principle is a great little thing to have in the back of your head, thinking they're finding it a bit too easy, they're finding it a bit too hard. What can I do here just to tweak this practice, this activity, just so that everybody's getting a bit of success, but everybody's got a little bit of challenge. I don't think it has to be four corners every time. It just might be. And this example is. So I'm going after four things. And this is almost like, for me, I use the analogy of sort of sticking a flag in the sand, sort of 6 weeks down the line, and sort of saying to the players, that's where we're going. This is where we're heading. So I'm going to share this information with them, the intended outcomes. That's where we're heading. And I'm going to come back to them all the time. I'm going to have it written on my whiteboard. And that might be as much for me to keep me on task and direct as it might be for the players, if I'm honest. But it gives us something to focus our discussions and chats and feedback and Q&A around. The coaching points then, the bottom half of the slide, that's the stuff that I might work on. So this is almost like the stuff that's going to help them work towards the intended outcomes. So if they want to develop their agility skills, we're going to need to do some stuff that makes them accelerate, decelerate, dodge and weave, change direction, stop and start, maintain the balance, stay upright, etc., etc., etc. So I'm unpicking the intended outcomes and saying, right, here's what I need to work on. But when am I going to work on them? Well, it's not picking one or two and saying it's happening in that particular session, because I don't know how long I'm going to need to work on it. So I've got a more fluid and flexible approach, which is why I've not got week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6. Because I'll be honest, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in week 4 when I write this. The players of the curriculum, the feedback from how they're getting on is going to tell me that. But this gives me a broad framework of saying, look, this is where we're going, players. This is the stuff I'm going to build in as we go through the coaching points. I'm not going to share all that with them. And we're probably going to use some Q&A to try and draw that out, depending on their age. And say, right, why were you successful there? How did you manage to get around that defender? What did you do? And we're going to draw out those coaching points, and then I'll fill a few gaps around it that we've maybe not got.
How do we use that? Maybe if we stick to the 6-week program, how do we use that and recognize when to adapt our coaching approach or our interventions with our players?
I think you have to make a decision and say, I'm either going to tell them or I'm going to let them go, and sometimes you have to tell people, if you do that, don't do that. If you do that, this will happen. Or you might ask people and go, you might say to them, what could you have done better? And so on and so forth. That is about coaching craft, and that takes a bit of time according to the players. Some players just need telling, and some players need a bit of cajoling. Not every player takes to question and answer. I know that for a fact, because the ones who probably had it all day at school, teachers asking them questions, they go, just tell me what you want me to do. So you have to know the players inside out. I don't think there's a hard, fast rule on any 6-week program. But I do think if you're laying down things saying you want brave, and you said at the very beginning you want braver players, then you're not going to get braver players if you keep telling them what to do.
This is another reason why we need a short-term program, because I don't think if you're planning individual sessions, you give long-term thought to this sort of stuff, like your coaching approach, or how you're going to communicate with your players, or what method you're going to use. I think if you're planning for 4 to 6, you might have a little bit of variety across there, either within sessions or across sessions. Whereas if I'm planning just for one session, I might not dive into this sort of stuff. It might sort of get left and not looked at. It was very much, this is the sort of filming of the delivery of the slide you saw a couple of slides ago, attacking to score goals and the 4 corner returns over 6 weeks. And this is just a couple of the practices within that. Very much what you'll see is no lines, no cues. I don't like the D word, the drills. I'm not a big fan of that. Do you want to do a drill or do you want to play a game? I know where the players would probably go. So lots of balls out, probably. Lots of fun, lots of engagement, lots of activity, lots of challenge. No chance of getting bored. Physically, they'll need a rest at some point because it's quite demanding. So it's games that are giving me returns across the 4 corners, but they're games that are allowing the coaching points and intended outcomes to come out. So there's a couple of games. I think it starts off with a game called Bib Steel, which is, as it sounds, as an arrival activity. Going into some games that are developing the agility skills from the Bib Steel, then moving into games like End Zone and learning through a game. So yeah, it just highlights and showcases a few of the games, and just brings what's on paper to life, I guess, Katie, doesn't it? With these videos, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess like we're trying to say here around like enjoyment, competitiveness, engagement, learning across the 4 corners. Even like these practices here, I mean, these players are dots. They look about 8, 9 years old maybe, but I think that the beauty is I do sessions like this with my players, even though I do Bib Steel and stuff like that. I do cat and mouse because, do you know what? It gets them doing a twist and turn without them thinking about it. They're A cells, they're D cells. And when they do go into like pressing or, you know, some like 3v3s, they're able to almost take some of the learning within those Bib Steel games and bring them to life within more maybe game-based elements. So I love this where you've got like learning through a match. So this is almost like a whole part whole. We've had your Bib Steel. Now you've got learning through a match, 3v2s, 2v2s, one's overloaded, one's matched up. And then we're going to go back into our kind of elements of our double trouble, which we had the week before. So they're almost just getting now to connect their learning from the previous week. And then we're going to finish with a game. So we've had the smaller sided games, the 3v2s, 2v2s, and now we can go into like 4v5s and 5v5s and almost bring elements of that together.
Safety zones are good. If you adopt safety zones, it gives people breathing space. And then you take those zones away if you want to raise the competitiveness. But the key for me is on all practices, and if you want to link the competitiveness to enjoyment, they all love scoring. So there's got to be a way of scoring. They find it easier, and I think this is important, if it's directional. That's forward, that's left, that's right. And the rules are very simple. And did you win? Did you win the practice? How did you get on? Oh, it's 2-2. Brilliant, right? So, you lost. Okay, try and win the next one. So you can embed. So there's nothing in there that none of those practices you can't adapt for academy or even beyond that.
Try and think about what's best for your players, where you think they best need help, where they're telling you they might need some more support or things they really enjoy doing, and use your observation skills to go, right, this is an aspect they really need some support with. So this is going to be our focus for the next 3 weeks, the next 6 weeks, or I might be able just to interchange it based on what's happening in a game.